Good evening, historians. Welcome to our first discussion post here in American Christian Heritage. My name is Chris Wood, and I will be talking to you today about Lemuel Haynes. And he is the subject of the author John Salient, who penned a book in 2003 entitled Black Puritan, Black Republican, The Life and Thought of Lemuel Haynes, 1753 to 1833. In the first chapter, A Further Liberty, in 1776, Salient details the early life of Lemuel Haynes, a mixed-race indentured servant who later became a soldier, abolitionist, and clergyman. The title of the chapter refers to an essay written by Haynes himself in 1776, shortly after the presentation of the Declaration of Independence. In Liberty Further Extended, Haynes provided an impassioned rebuke of slavery and an enlightened recommendation to extend the freedom from tyranny to blacks and other white races, a freedom for which patriots of many races fought. Lemuel had quite the interesting upbringing. His mother was white from a somewhat distinguished family. His father was of unmingled African extraction. Lemuel, therefore, was of mixed race. His mother birthed him in secret and gave him up to another white family who took him in to raise as one of their own. Mr. Haynes, the gentleman who sheltered Lemuel's mother as she gave birth, bestowed his name upon the young lad, though seemingly unbeknownst to him. Due to the obvious nature of his racial makeup, his prospects were limited. He saw fit to enter into indentured servitude with his surrogate family, who treated him less a servant and more one of their own children. When the time came, he would join the Minutemen in 1774. He carried on in this fashion for a couple of years, with key events in the Revolution guiding his steps, such as the Boston Massacre and the March on Ticonderoga. It was during this time that he penned his most cherished work, and the work that we have referenced already, Liberty Further Extended, or Free Thoughts on the Illegality of Slave Keeping. It seems most fitting that he would produce such a work, being an educated man, having fought alongside freemen and slaves alike, and contemplating the worth of his service. What was it all for if he and those like him only fought for the freedom of others and not themselves as well? If the soldiering years had him questioning the value of freedom and the equality of liberty, it was his religious foundational upbringing that prompted him to question the entire enterprise of slavery altogether. This religious upbringing would also compel him to pursue an ordination as a minister in the 1780s, where he would have the distinction of being one of the very few black ministers of the age, and the only one speaking to predominantly white congregations. In his preeminent work that he wrote during the heightened fervor of American patriotism, he drew very heavily from his religious background to systematically dismantle the institution of slavery. He compared the slaves in the colonies to the Israelites in Egypt, the same song of promised freedom on their lips. He compared the slave traders to King Ahab, each alloying their religious heritage with the idolatry of greed, much as Ahab did with the idol worshippers of Baal. It was this same biblical corollary that would be used throughout the abolitionist movement. In fact, the noted 19th century abolitionist Frederick Douglass, in one of his speeches, in addition to allusions to biblical events, a quote from the Methodist Conference. The conference acknowledges that slavery is contrary to the laws of God, man, and nature, and hurtful to society. Contrary to the dictates of conscience and true religion, this statement was pulled from the conference notes in 1780, the very same year that Lemuel Haynes became the first black minister in the United States. A loose connection, but a connection all the same. The ideas preached by Haynes shone through in Douglass's speeches. Haynes was an interesting man who lived an interesting life, became the gatekeeper for the abolitionist movement that eventually led to the eradication of the institution of slavery altogether, and literally fought for the rights of all Americans in the Revolutionary War. In Haynes's own words, quoting scripture, of course, "Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new." The old includes West African slavery, and the new, freedom. Thank you, and have a good night.